everybody. The panelists up here are all from the present day, unlike the previous discussion. I'm happy to be joined by Temelkuran, who is a Turkish novelist and political thinker, by Yascha Mounk, writer, an academic who's written extensively on democracy, our subject, Mehdi Jomaa, from former Tunisian Prime Minister, and Ibrahim, founder and chair of the eponymous foundation. Yascha, I think I'd like to start with you, if I may. 3 decades ago, we really assumed that liberal democracy had won. It was game over. That didn't exactly pan out. Briefly, could you summarize what, in your view, happened? Why did autocratic systems, right-wing movements, anti-immigration movements suddenly get, or gradually get, the wind in their sails?
1, 2, 3. All right. Thank you. That's a great question. Let me start by perhaps setting the scene about where we are at the world today, how the world is different from what it was 30 years ago, and then give an answer of how we got there. I do think that we are at this moment in a real competition, not between East and West, not between North and South, but between democracies and autocracies. We have democracies in many parts of the world, in practically every continent on the world. We have people striving to live in freedom and liberty in every corner of the world, in every part of the globe. But we also have very ruthless autocracies, dictators who want to oppress their own people and who want to expand their power internationally, who are doing what they can to subvert those democracies, who are doing what they can to keep down citizens aspiring for democratic movements. And I do want to take one moment to say that it is very important for democratic leaders to be self-critical, for democracies to be very clear about what they have done wrong, for academics and intellectuals who are citizens of democracies to hold their own governments to account and say, perhaps at this point we might have done something differently, perhaps this strategic choice was wrong. But I also think that there is a very clear contrast today between countries from South Korea to the United States, to Greece and other European countries that are democracies, and countries like China and Russia that are not democracies. I think there's a very clear contrast between countries that allow their citizens to express their political opinions without having to fear going to jail, that attempt, however imperfectly, to treat ethnic and religious minorities with respect rather than trying to re-educate them, all of which is a reason not to call certain countries normal. And whatever the flaws of the foreign policy of Western nations may have been for the last decades, it's very important to say much more clearly than the last panel did that Vladimir Putin decided at the end of February to start a war of aggression against the sovereign nation of Ukraine. And that I think all of us here, hopefully, stand in solidarity with the people who are defending their right to live independently, sovereignly, and in freedom in Ukraine today.
Yascha, given what you just said, how do you explain? President Macron, I live in Paris, said the other day something that I hadn't heard framed exactly that way previously, which was we have to understand that demographically, most of the world is not with us. India is not really with us. China is not really with us. When President Zelensky got on the phone to African heads of state, only 4 showed up. They were not interested. So if the choice is at stuck, as you just portrayed it, why is it that most of the world doesn't get it?
Well, so first of all, I would very much distinguish between governments and people. There is a lot of people in Russia, especially in the last days, who are deeply upset by what is being done in their name, by their government, but they are not able to choose democratically. There are many people in China and in other countries that very much see the thought for this war with Vladimir Putin and with Russia, even if their governments may not be on that side. But I agree with you that going back to the question about the perspective for democracy, we assumed in 1990 and 1991 that the ideological battle had been won. We assumed that democracies would be able to keep their citizens satisfied and to keep them voting for moderate politicians. And what's happened in the last decades is a couple of things. The first is that we haven't been able to offer citizens enough economic growth and enough assurance that their futures are going to be better than in the past, which has made them impatient with their own political systems. The second is that we have often ended up with very complacent political and journalistic, if I may say so, elites that have started to look down on a lot of the citizens in their own countries in a way that has provoked a very deep and angry counter-reaction by people who feel disrespected by their own institutional leaders. And we have been blind.
They felt they were held in contempt?
Sorry?
They felt they were held in contempt, these people?
I think so. I'm struck by the way in which many of my friends and colleagues speak about average citizens, whether it's in the United States or in Europe. And I think that's something that citizens felt. But we've also underestimated that people who have power want to do what they can to hold on to that power and what to do what they can to expand it. And that in 1990, 1995, and 2000, a lot of the world was not a consolidated democracy. A lot of the world was ruled by dictators then as it is now, and those dictators have tried over the decades to use our complacency, to use our lack of clarity in order, for example, to make many European countries dependent on gas from Russia. And so I think what we need in the next decades is political systems that are much better at having economic growth that actually ends up in the pockets of ordinary citizens, much better at finding a cultural compact within our countries which ensures that we are respectful of ethnic religious minorities. We are also respectful of every citizen and the place and the value that they have in the country. And we need a foreign policy which seeks compromise and seeks peace, but that is uncompromising and standing up for the free people in the world who are under threat from dictators.
Thank you, Yascha. AJ, you've written a book about how democracies are undone. You've been virulently attacked in Turkey for opposing the Erdogan government. What happened to Turkey? What's the best way to describe it today? I mean, is it an illiberal democracy on the Orban kind of model? What is Turkey today, and how do you think democracy is lost or has been lost there?
Well, is this work? Yeah. Hello, everyone. Turkey is a complicated country like any other country, so it's a long story, but of course it started in 1980s. Not much different than United States and Trump's story, actually. All the story of democracy being damaged started in 1980s, I think. Ours started with a violent military coup, but yours started with Reagan. And then, decades of infantilizing the masses, proclaiming politics as dirty, and most importantly, rising inequality, brought us here to those so-called strong leaders such as Putin, Erdogan, Orban, or whatnot. And I think I have to challenge Yascha in one point. It is not like one part of the world is not democratic and the other part is democratic. It is more complicated than that. I think democracy has failed people in the West. And Macron, as you said, is now trying to protect. Macron or other centrist politicians are trying to protect democracy from the people, which is an ironic thing, especially to say in Athens. We are talking about democracy, and this is a very fancy place. This is a very high-level meeting. But what I know from Athens and ancient Greek is that actually democracy smells onions. A story I told in that book, How to Lose a Country. In Acropole, people were climbing to Acropole every day to build a democracy once. And each one of them had a loaf of bread under their arms and an onion. So actually, to build democracy and to save democracy requires a lot of hard work on the ground. Only then you can save the pathos of democracy, as Madam President put earlier. And today, now, we are actually protecting democracy from those people. And this is what happened in Turkey as well as other places. There were too many people who had nothing to eat. So these citizens were easily transformed into subjects of charity by those people who gave them bread. Erdogan gave them bread and asked for their vote. It wasn't different for Orban or Putin or Trump even, or Boris Johnson. I remember him sending packages, food packages to people.
You mean bread and circuses,
Yeah.
what Romans...
Yeah, when people are poor, when people are cold, you cannot expect them to think about democracy. You cannot expect them to get excited about democracy. And this is our challenge now. We are trying to make people excited about democracy. So how do we do that? How do we deal with their anger, with their fear? Because right-wing populists, Erdogan, this is what he did in Turkey, and other leaders as well, they have this immense dexterity when managing politics of emotions. So he gave them bread, he mobilized the ignorance and organized the ignorance, and he mobilized the fears. It's the same playbook everywhere. And finally, we ended up, protecting democracy from the people. This is something we have to talk about, think about, and the only reason, the most important...
That's an oxymoron. You cannot protect democracy from the people. Democracy is the people. Democracy
exactly, but Macron is protecting it from yellow jackets, no?
Casting a ballot.
Let me finish this. I'm going to say one more sentence, and then I'll finish. I think democracy failed in its fundamental promise, which was equality. When equality is not there, democracy is becoming a theatrics of itself. If we cannot deal with social equality and the problem of neoliberalism, I think we don't have much to do by fixing here and there democratic mechanisms. And this is what we tried in Turkey for quite a long time. It didn't work.
Thank you. Mo, could I... Yeah, the rapid rise of enormous inequality has been, particularly I think in my country, the United States, has been absolutely devastating to democracy. Mo, could I turn to Africa a moment, which will account for 25% of the world's population by 2050. Nigeria will be bigger than the United States with a population of over 400 million. How do you see the state of democracy across Africa? Do you think it is making headway?
Not at all. Let's speak frankly. It's very difficult for us because we see you guys as have betrayed all the ideals, all the stuff you taught us. And we look at you and we see what these liberal democracies are doing. You created a world order at the Second World War. And we are excluded from that world order. It's only centric around you and your friends. The guys who lost the war, Germany or Japan, bigger economy, more people, than UK or France. They're out. They lost the war. India, bigger economy than UK. 10 times or 20 times the population, out. Whole of Africa, 1/4. That's why I love the UN, but I'm sorry, your organization is dysfunctional. Cannot make any decision, cannot do anything. Why? Because you have 5 guys sitting there with red cards, having impunity, giving impunity to their clients, and you tell us this is a world order. Sorry, this is not a world order. This is nonsense. Then a country invade another country, and you are in outrage. And many people, I mean, you go to the UN to have resolutions or whatever, and half of the African, almost just less than half, did not support the resolution. 28 countries supported the US resolution. And I got a lot of calls from my friends, what is happening? Why you guys are not? And I said, oh, let me find out. So I called some friends, some presidents. I know very well, I don't know where they stand. I said, excuse me, why you abstained? You know, the answer was so simple, it was, right, you want me to condemn an aggression against a sovereign country. But what happened in Iraq? Was that an aggression against a sovereign country? Was there a UN resolution? What happened in Libya? All of Sahara, all North Africa suffering now from the intervention of Libya. You help create all the terrorist groups there. Kalashnikovs there as cheap as ice cream. Because all these weapons you threw it there to change regime.
When you say you, you mean the West?
I mean the West.
So you're
because
telling you're telling us that anti-Western sentiment in Africa, anti-Western sentiment feeling in Africa
no, there
is rampant.
It's not, no,
very
it's
powerful?
not. It's not anti-West at all.
Okay.
People love what the West talk about. The West idea of liberal democracy, we love it. I'm as liberal Democrat as anybody in this room. But I look at you, and you're not practicing what you talk about. Look what happened during the pandemic. You guys set a World Trade Organization, free trade, yeah? But, vaccines now. No. I don't give you vaccines. US banned export of 32 components. Under the WTO rules, which you created, in case of emergency, IPR can be suspended in case of emergency. Did we have in our history more emergency than COVID? Why you guys stopped WTO allowing us to have access to vaccine? I mean, so people look at you and say, guys, are you for real?
Yeah, let me ask you something then. So what you're saying is that our model is not credible. You're saying that we're hypocrites. You're saying that all our talk about liberal values, democracy, rule of law, it's very selective, it doesn't apply to everybody. So what does that mean for trying to establish democracy in Africa? If the model is not credible, then what are you left with?
This is our trouble, because I go around Africa preaching democracy. And people said, I sat many times across the table from a president, and he said to me, you want me to build my country as a, US as a model or China as a model? Look at US, the Congress cannot pass a single decision. Polarized. Look at the Supreme Court. Is that a court? This became weaponized. This is a political organization. This judge is a Trump judge. This judge is an Obama judge. And, excuse me, he says, if I appoint judges here, those guys cut my head. They say, I'm interfering in judicial, but they are doing it over there. So if the courts lose legitimacy, if the parliament doesn't work, they say, is that the model you guys giving to us?
So what is the model you're left with? Is it despotism?
I say it is broken, but it can be repaired. The problem with other system is very difficult to repair. But that is the only way I can answer. But I can see the cynicism. I can see why people are unable. You look at all these organizations, the World Bank, the IMF, etc. It's all US-centric. You're excluding other people. And no world order. That's why when you talk about the broken world, rule of law, the world order, this has been eroding all these years. And the sooner we try to integrate other people in this system, the better. But no, we sit with our Red Card Security Council, we control the World Bank, we control the IMF, and we say, oh, why people are not following us? Macron is right. Half the people are fed up. But that is not only our problem in Africa. Roger, this is your problem too. In France, where we live, the fascists were very close to the Élysée.
But they lost.
Yesterday,
But
Italy is taken over.
But they lost.
Sweden last week. In Italy, they won. In Sweden, they won. What's happening in Europe? Why the discontent of Europe is because people are questioning this liberal democracy. Are you guys real?
Okay.
What happened with the financial crisis? What happened with inequality?
We can get back to that. Let me bring in.
The danger is in your society also.
I understand. Yeah. Let me bring in Mehdi because. Tunisia. We were all banking on Tunisia. We believed in Tunisia. After the Arab Spring, most of the countries that threw out their dictators quite quickly fell back into autocratic and repressive systems, but not Tunisia. And Ennahda seemed to suggest a way that Islam and a functioning democracy could coexist. Ennahda gave up on the push to impose or include Sharia law in the constitution, and there were a whole series of compromises. And now, in the last couple of years, Parliament has effectively been disbanded. The president has taken a form of autocratic power, and all of us believers in Tunisia are wondering what happened. Is the experiment over of an open, liberal, democratic Tunisia giving an example to the world of a reasonable form of political Islam?
First, I would like to thank you for the invitation. It's the first time my participation here in the forum on behalf of Club de Madrid. I will start, before going through the details, by a positive answer. On my point of view, we can still betting on the Tunisian experience. You know, I call it the startup democracy. With any startup, it's risky, it's trouble, but it keeps all the leverage that has a startup. Now, coming back to answer you in more details, I would like to begin by reminding you of the context of this nascent democracy. It was among this, what we call the Arabic Spring. It's a big geopolitical change in the region. And Tunisia was able to face all the threats, this insecurity and stability, the threat of terrorism. We succeeded, even with this open system of governance, with this democracy, with this lack of authority sometimes, we succeeded to go beyond that, and today we are facing a threat of terrorism like any other country in the region, or even in Europe. So, one lesson from this experience in Tunisia: we succeeded to face these threats. We succeeded to set up institution with a new constitution. And I remember it was a big effort made in the constitution, taking advantage from all the experience through the world to have the best thing. Myself, I organized the first election, and it was really fair and applauded by all the world. But we forget something, that democracy is not only elections, is not constitution, is not a text. Until now, we're still discussing all the articles of the text. My own experience shows that...
So what is democracy?
For me, democracy is, the target of democracy is the citizen. It's the freedom, it's the prosperity for the people, prosperity, security, their freedom, the rule of law, all these values. So
that is what the Constitution guarantees.
No. Let me finish my idea.
Maybe.
No. I think that the Constitution is very important, but my idea is not there. Is to say it's not enough. You need the right leadership to run that. And the experience and why we have troubles today in Tunisia, because we organized an election, but people were not prepared, and the leadership we raise is more skilled in the debates, in the political fighting, in ideology, but no one has a vision. No one knows how to drive this plane. You know, you have a state, you have institution then to run and to manage. If you are only skilled in the opposition to make speeches, to make debates, it's not enough. And really, if there is something that we have to pay attention in the nascent democracy, it's different from the ancient or the mature democracy, which has some tradition of institution. And I can say something.
I mean, is President Kais Saied today, is he a dictator?
No, I will explain the process. What happens after these successful elections in 2014, 2015, that there was big expectation from people, but there is no efficiency, and we did not succeed to give back dividends of the democracy of the people.
But the whole point of a democracy is if the leaders are lousy, you throw them out at an election and you get another government. If you decide, halfway through, this is no good, and you disband the parliament, that's the end of democracy, right?
No, of course. Of course, and that's why I still believing that we will succeed by the end. But it's difficult because each time you raise a new government, they fail because they are not skilled. It's a problem as well of knowledge. If you never manage anything, if you never check it, you don't know how to feed people, how to organize things, how to manage, how to get a vision, how you can manage, how you can manage a country without a vision, without a knowledge of the geopolitics, without a knowledge of all these changes. We are not a big power in the region, a small country. So we are subjected to all the influence of what's happening in the world. We are subjected to the financial change, to the economical change, to the security, to the political. So you get people, okay, through election, but these people is not prepared. Today, really we have to focus how to prepare the next generation of leaders. We're still focusing in democracy and still believing that in Tunisia we will succeed. We thought that the transition could take 5-10 years. I think now it's more because we have to go deeper and to make it succeed. Just what I suggest for that really is to start with education. Why we succeeded in Tunisia among all these troubles in the Arab Spring? Because we started before 1 century, more than 1 century before, with constitution, and we started 6 decades before with education. Now we have to educate citizens. What is the meaning of democracy? What is the benefits of democracy? How to choose the leaders? It's not a question of that, but how? You know what I see in all the election campaigns, it's more emotion, it's more ideology, but less vision, less programs, and people are not prepared to judge, so we have to include that in the education, civil education, in the schools, how to prepare people to be interested to the public scene, but how to select and to choose this new generation of leaders.
Thank you very much. I'll get to you in one second. I just wanted to ask Yascha, well, I mean, is it a quick point you want to make about it?
I think we are confusing between democracy and good governance. Democracy is one pillar of 4 or 5 pillars for good governance. So democracy in itself is not a temple to worship in. It is one important element of good governance. But besides that, there's delivery of baskets of good for people. There is jobs, there is economy, there is human rights, there is a lot of other things, rule of law. So we should not worship in this temple of democracy. We have democracy, then everything is fine. No, they had democracy, but more people are hungry. More people without job. It doesn't work.
Okay.
Then you end up with an asshole like this case, Saeed or whoever, to come and take over. I'm sorry.
Yascha, I think actually you do worship democracy. And I'd like you to maybe explain why. We've just heard to many people, and I think to you, the war in Ukraine, morally, ethically speaking, is pretty clear-cut. The invasion of a neighbor, tens of thousands dead, a form of Russian imperialist nationalism setting out to crush and even eliminate from the map a country. And Western democracies in Europe and the United States have come very strongly to the defense of Ukraine, I think because many believe that democracy itself, liberal values, rule of law, the things you were just talking about, are at stake right there in Kherson, in Donetsk, in Kharkiv, in Kyiv. That is what is being fought over. So I'd like you to respond to this very frontal criticism of the West, and also explain why you do actually worship democracy. If you do, I think you do.
Yeah. I don't know whether I worship anything. It's not the piece of vocabulary I would choose. Let me say 2 things. I think the first is that it is very easy to be critical about the failings of democracies, and it's important to be critical about the failings of democracies. But it is very clear from which countries people migrate to which countries. There's not hundreds of thousands of people at the borders of the United States or of Sweden who are trying to leave the country right now. There's many thousands of people desperately trying to leave Russia in order to avoid getting drawn into this war. There's many millions of people who would like to live in the democracies of this world. Many of the rich democracies, but also some of the poorer democracies, because they want to be able to speak freely about what they believe. And so, you can talk about the great values of democracy, which are important, about the promise of equality, about the promise of good governance, about the promise of allowing people opportunity to pursue their dreams, whether it be economic or others. And all of that is part of what democracies are able to deliver relatively well, even in countries where we might criticize it. I'm sick of the political debate in the United States. I'm certainly sick of part of the political spectrum in the United States. There are many things to despair about in the current state of America. But relative to most societies in the history of the world, America still continues to be a place of incredible opportunity and actually of an incredibly high standard of living for the vast majority of the population. So I can tell you about all the wonderful things that democracy gives, but I think what's more important is to talk about the horrible things that happen when you don't have a separation of powers, when you don't have freedom of speech, when you don't have the ability to vote out a government that abuses its own citizens. Because the great value of democracy does not lie in the wonderful things it gives you, it lies in avoiding the worst things. It lies, as Amartya Sen has pointed out, for the history of India relative to other countries, and relative absence of people starving in the streets. It lies in people being able to say what they think about the world without having to fear going to jail. It lies, despite the many serious mistakes in foreign policy that democracies have made, including the Iraq War, in the fact that democracies are less likely to be in conflict. It lies in the fact that there are limits on the exercise of power internally, which make it such that when there's a huge economic crisis, the government has to be responsive. So, when we look at democracies, we can say they're falling so short of all of their ideals, and they are. Democracy is an eternal struggle to live up to the incredibly ambitious ideals that these systems of governments have set for themselves. But once you start looking away from the realm of democracies, at countries from Venezuela to Russia to China to North Korea, and look at what it means when you have a real absence of democracy, I think you recognize that the reason to defend democracy is that, for all of its many flaws, it protects people from the very worst that politics can do to people.
Yascha, I think I got the impression you wanted to say something, so
yes,
please say
I do. I always want to say something. United States is still the place of opportunities. Europe is still the place that people from Africa swim across Mediterranean to come to. So obviously, they have democracy, some sort of democracy, but we have to be careful. In New York Times, in Guardian, in several places, when Trump was elected, when Boris Johnson was elected, there were these articles, and the title was overused, "Winter is Coming." I don't know if you remember. It was the fashionable title at the moment, Game of Thrones, quote. And I always wanted to say, you know nothing, Jon Snow. I come from Turkey, and you don't know what it is, what's at stake here. And I think finally, after Italy, Sweden, we are understanding what is ahead of us. You said that, but they lost for France or for Trump, or I don't remember.
Well, in the end, Macron's majority.
Yeah,
he won clearly.
That is the thing that we shouldn't be saying. We shouldn't repeat too many times, because first of all, these movements, fascist movements, and finally New York Times called them fascist as well, fascist movements actually determine the entire playground, and then they pull the entire political sphere to the right. So they actually won already. And it took the big, mature democracy of the United States, the entire establishment of democracy, to bring one clown down. This is very, very serious.
I mean, why?
So,
democracy involves respect of the people's choice. So why are people moving to the right, as you just said? I mean, is the problem a little bit a conference like this? I imagine most people here are on the liberal side of the political spectrum. I mean, are there a lot of people in a lot of countries who are tired of being told by people like us what they should think about gender, what they should think about the immigrant next door, what they should eat in order to change the planet, why they should buy an electric car, which in France, even with all the subsidies, is way more expensive than they can afford. All these people in the metropole who have no idea what it's like to live in the periphery, where there are no more hospitals, no more train stations. And here we are, all gathered, mouthing away about, what is right and what is good. I mean, people are moving to the right for a reason. What is the reason?
All those matters you counted are very important, of course. But what matters is what these people think about redistribution of wealth and universal income. All those things are important, but this is more important.
There is a cultural element, a strong cultural element, don't you think?
No, it's an ideological element, and we have to make it clear. It's not cultural. And also,
isn't that
let me finish
isn't
this,
that showing contempt? I mean, it's.
Excuse me?
isn't that a form of contempt for people who culturally have different views of...
No. I don't mean that. All these, all this list you counted are very important to me, and they're very close to my heart.
Yeah.
But what determines the destiny of democracy, the future of democracy, what we think about redistribution of wealth or universal income. And I think this is, of course, more, wider scale thing, but when it comes to real politics, I think what is important is the centrist liberal politicians have to decide if they are more afraid of fascists or leftists. Because the center, that was another, popular title in Western media for quite a long time, center will not hold without the left. And Biden knew that. That's why he won the elections, actually. So this is what the centrist liberal democracy, the liberal Democrat politicians have to think about. They cannot go more right than the fascists. So there is only one side that can help them, that is the left. So that is why we have to think about redistribution of wealth, universal income, and those things that matter to people that will get really cold and hungry this winter. And that it will be the winter, I think. That winter will be this winter.
It's a difficult winter coming, certainly, with the war and energy prices, food prices, markets in a free fall. It's going to be a pretty combustible time, I think. Mo, when you look ahead to this coming winter and beyond it, and consider the future of democracy, we've been here for a decade. We've seen all kinds of crises, including here in Greece, with Golden Dawn at one point looked very powerful. But Greece has prevailed despite an enormous influx of refugees. So sometimes the worst does not happen. I think it's important to remember that. And democracies are resilient and they're slow to anger, but when they do, watch out. So what do you see in your crystal ball?
I love to be an optimist, and my job actually when I go around is to be an optimist. But frankly, in this room, I'm worried. I'm really worried. A number of reasons. Our pain in Europe, the threshold of our pain in Europe is quite low. You remember what Draghi said about the people dying in Ukraine, but you guys need to lower down your air conditioning? And people are upset, We are happy to fight to the last soldier in Ukraine, but not to pay more for our petrol or our gas, because our threshold, we are pampered. We are really pampered. And our scope of comfort, look at all this trouble we have around us. Why? And that's what Putin is trying to do. The threshold of pain in Russia is higher than here. So the game is, who's going to scream first? You guys or our guys?
I think that is dangerous. I think that's debatable. I think what you said is debatable.
It's dangerous.
I'm not sure the threshold for pain in Russia. Look at the threshold for pain in Russia right now. I mean, there are lines miles and miles long at the border of Georgia. Those people felt the threshold of pain getting very, very close to them.
Yeah, but you look, there'll always be some nice pictures on TV or whatever, but we have to be careful. All the opinion polls, and independent ones, showed that this guy, unfortunately, has high approval rating. His approval rating is higher than Biden approval rating in US. This is a fact. So there is difference between wishful thinking and fact. I wish this guy died tomorrow, honestly, but there's difference. This guy has support so far of his people, and they suffered a lot.
But Mo, if you put a gun to somebody's head and you say, "What do you think of me?" The likely response is, "You're great."
Okay,
of most human beings.
Yeah, look, the fact, what I know from Western, I don't read Russian. Unfortunately, I don't know the language. But from the Western media, from Western sources, everybody agrees that this guy approval rating is very high. Anybody dispute that? Anybody dispute that the approval rating is high? This is the Western media. This is not Pravda. Come on, guys. Let us just be realistic, not wishful thinking, okay? And my worry is people start to lose really their support for Ukraine as the winter comes and the prices gets high and inflation gets high, and we lose support, we lose popular support. That worries me. It's not, I'm not supporting the people there. I'm just saying we have to be careful, and we have to know what is the roadmap in front of. This war also, just a minute,
yeah, sure.
This war also is a great distraction, unfortunately, from a huge problem we all have as humanity, which is climate change. This is going to kill us. All of us, all of humanity, Russian, American, Chinese, everybody. And we are not paying enough attention to that. We need to work with other people to really solve. We need to work with the Russian, we need to work with the Chinese, we need to everybody to solve these problems. But unfortunately, at the moment, we are not talking. Now, Roger, if I don't talk to my enemy, to whom I talk? I look at a mirror?
Yeah, well, that's what I wanted to ask you, Mo. Oh, apparently time is up.
Sorry.
Okay.
So we can talk till morning about this. Yeah.
I thought I was going to be instructed over here, but over there.
Roger,
okay.
Can I say one sentence only?
Of course you can, yeah.
Because we didn't mention this, and there are very many women here, so I want to say this. Today in Iran, women are dying and because they are rising up against a tyranny, one of the most horrible regimes in the world. So let's send our solidarity to them for all the women in Athens today.
Thank you. That's a great note.
Roger, since you are here,
end on the courage of Iranian women, which I witnessed myself in 2009 when they were being beaten in the streets in front of me. And these are images, and them urging the men of Iran, come on, get up, go forward, braver than the men. It was really extraordinary. I will never forget it.
Can we send a message of support to the thousands people who lost their lives, the young people in Sudan, my country, I'm Sudanese actually, dying for democracy in Sudan for 2 years now. People fighting for democracy. So democracy has appeal. People die for it. And we send our regard to those people.
Thank you all very much. Thank you.